We're now in the 5th generation of consoles, and this is where controllers start to go wild out there. They start to get pretty unique, start to get pretty crazy. Sega Saturn releases in 1994 in Japan, 1995 in US. Costs about $399 or about $825 today. 6 buttons, 2 shoulder pads, fairly responsive D-pad, felt pretty good in the hands, pretty good build quality, overall solid controller. Had a lot of good games for it, and quite frankly, this was the controller you wanted to have for those games. To play these kind of games on like a PS1 or a Nintendo 64 controller, it just wouldn't have got it. It just wouldn't have. Now we have the PS1 that releases. Now this is the console that dethroned Nintendo. It basically told Nintendo, hey, you're not welcome here anymore. We got this. We're going to take it from here. This is the best-selling console on the market. It would take Nintendo 23 years to beat it, even though it is basically handhelds, and even the Switch, which is technically a hybrid of a handheld and a normal console, but let's face it, it's still a handheld. Nintendo would never release a console that could beat the PlayStation 1, unless we're counting the Switch, which I kind of do. I kind of do. Even though it was natively made to be a handheld console, you'd still act as a console. You can hook up the TV, comes with a Bluetooth controller. It's kind of a console. The PS1 releases in 1994 in Japan, 1995 in US. Costs about $300, which is about $600 today's money. Sold 102 million units. It sold in the United States 100,000 day one. Now the controller, we all know it. It's got 4 shoulder buttons, got a D-pad, really nice D-pad. Not too spongy, but it doesn't feel like it's going to dig into your fingers and, put permanent marks on your thumb. The iconic, of course, triangle, square, X, and circle buttons as well. Because Sony is sitting there going, well, let's try something different. Still, this was the controller. This was the controller that would look at Nintendo and just kick it off its platform and like, we got this. We got this. We'll take it from here. And Nintendo would never really return to the market again with a controller that just kind of says, oh, okay, we're going to follow the party. Unless we're talking about the Wii controller, and we're talking about the Switch controller, and then we're talking about... But never mind, we're not going to talk about that. And the weird thing is, though, is like a lot of controllers, they were coming out with, they had joystick. This is one of the controllers, comes out 5th generation, no joysticks. I guess they figured, we don't need it. Analog sticks just weren't considered standard for the time. It wouldn't be until the Nintendo 64 comes out that they started to become normal. PS1 would not release the dual Joy-Con until 1997, releases a DualShock, Rumble, and joystick controller. They basically looked at what Nintendo did with the Rumble Pack, and they're like, oh, this is revolutionary. And every console would have this Rumble Pack feature. And we'll get to that in a minute. The PlayStation controller would be discontinued in 2006. Not only would Sony continue to use this style of controller to this day, a lot of consoles were copying this controller. They basically looked at it as like, whoa. So it was pretty revolutionary for the time. All right, Nintendo 64 comes out. Released in 1996 USA and Japan, roughly about the same time. Costs about $200, which is about $400 today. It was a very affordable console. You'd be surprised to hear about somebody who didn't have a Nintendo 64. It was a hot console. Everybody wanted this thing. Sold about 300,000 units day one in Japan, and nearly 33 million units worldwide. While the numbers aren't astronomical, this is a very revolutionary console. It made waves, and a lot of people copied it. The main thing was that controller. It introduced Rumble, which is something nobody had ever done before. I mean, they even had a videotape for it, which I urge you to look it up. It is unhinged.
Hey, buddy, you got the time?
Sure, it's,
Hey,
aren't you the...
It is hilarious. You've got Genesis and Sony kidnapped they kidnapped Mario and they're putting him in a vice. It's like, we want to know what the Rumble Pack is.
Or else, Plumber Boy here gets
What are you guys doing with Mario? No! Leave Mario out of this.
It's a really good video. The controller, however, was a nightmare to look at. I kind of understand why they did it, because they had the big M. They kind of look at an M, you know, Mario. That's their baby. That's their mascot. So the controller kind of looks like an M, which I assume that's why they designed it that way. It was also really weird. It's kind of like the controller had a weird shape, and it's kind of like that scene in Ed, and Eddie, where Ed goes to pick up the potato peeler. He doesn't really know what he's doing until he picks it up, and he kind of figures it out from there. Same thing with that. You grab the N64 controller, you don't really know what to do with it, and then you kind of figure it out, just like, oh, okay, this is fine. This feels fine. Not a lot of games use just the D-pad and the buttons. A couple fighting games use that. For the most part, your hand was grabbing the N64 cock, and that's how you aimed. Let's face it, you were jerking it off. Joystick was pretty much used normally for all the games, save for like a handful of games that would naturally rely on the D-pad. Had 2 shoulder buttons. You'd never use the L one though, unless you're playing one of those fighting games. Had a unique Z button near the middle, which was normally used for shooting games. Mario used it for a gimmick for the backflipping, I believe, and it had 6 buttons. You only use about 2 of them. The other 4 were usually like, or they're for the camera, accessories, or something. If you're playing Legend of Zelda, they weren't the primary button. This is only the A and the B button, which is unique because you had all these buttons and you only used about 2 of them primarily. So for like that generation of consoles, to have a console controller only really utilize mainly 3 buttons, it's pretty impressive. But once again, Nintendo was setting trends by releasing the Rumble Pack. Now this thing, it naturally fit into the controller. It had a slot. The N64 had a slot at the back. You'd slap that thing in and it would respond when you were playing the game. Let's say if you get hit, or you crash into like a wall or something, or if you use a weapon, it rumbled. It would spin a small weighted crescent shape attached to a motor, and it would spin. That was the rumble. And of course, it added about 3 pounds to the controller as well. That thing was heavy. Because it's not like the Nintendo 64 controller was not awkward enough. Let's give it 3 more pounds to it. But it is because of the Rumble Pack that we have that as an industry standard. You'd be hard pressed to find a console or even a controller, a third market or otherwise, that doesn't have a vibration feature. This is also where the term Nintendium came from. Now, if you don't know that term, it's basically synonymous with Nintendo products and just they're indestructible. They felt. I mean, these consoles were solid. They were very well built. The plastic that they used, the grade of the plastic they used for these consoles was really good. You could smash this thing with a couple hammer blows and it would still work. X-Play did a test on this as well, and they smashed the shit out of these controllers. GameCube came out pretty well. The lid's still closed, it would still start. This thing was broken into chunks. You could still plug it in, you'd still get video. So it has been proven that Nintendium's real. Next is the Virtual Boy. Why am I even mentioning this in the first place? It's technically a console, and I really like the controller. I thought it was a very unique controller, and it might as well have been a VR device anyways. Marketed as a 32-bit tabletop portable video game console, released in 1995, the idea was utilized what is called scanned linear array technology, a red LED eyepiece display developed by Reflection Technology Incorporated. Nintendo, they wanted to be known as innovators, so that's why they released this thing. Basically, the game was played with varying degrees of red. And I don't know if you're looking at me, but varying shades of red are fine so long as you have other colors to contrast it, such as my awesome blue striped shirt, and this awesome jacket, and my awesome sunglasses. However, if it's just straight red, it's a little annoying to look at. The console in general was awful. It was a commercial failure, was uncomfortable to play with, but somehow sold a staggering 770,000 units, almost 1 million units sold. Cost about $179, buying an N64 at that point is equivalent to costing about $300 today. And like I said, the only thing I liked about it was a controller. 2 buttons, 2 D-pads for whatever reason, 2 shoulder buttons. The hand grips were massive, which was great if you had big monster hands like I do. It's fairly comfortable to hold. The dual D-pads, they always threw me off. But the main issue was that block that did get in the way, which held the electronics. And, you know, if you hit it just right, it just nicks your fingers and it's very annoying. Now we're off to the 6th generation of consoles. You're not going to see a lot of consoles coming out this day and age. The number of the consoles that came out, unlike back in the day, they had the same games. These games are starting to become a lot more unique, and to release the nth copy of Pong, nobody was going to buy that. Matter of fact, that is what caused the game crash of 1983, and we can thank Nintendo for pulling us out of that. Those Japanese bastards, they know how to do gaming. The Dreamcast comes out, and this thing just blew people out of the water. It was just gorgeous 3D. How the games released were great. First console to have a native Ethernet port, and it, quite frankly, is the best console of all time, with the strangest controller of all time. It was a little bit bulky. Actually, it was a lot bulky, kind of hard to hold. Triggers instead of shoulder pads. But the unique thing about it was it had something called a VMU, Visual Memory Unit. It acted as the game's memory card, but also had some other features, such as the ability to play some mini games in it, and sometimes display stats in the game, like ammo count, things like that. The problem with this console was it took forever to develop. By the time it released, it was too late. PSP was around the controller. If this had released earlier, say in the previous generation, it had blown everything out of the water. This would also be Sega's last try into the console market. Say goodbye to Sega games, or Sega consoles, because that's just not happening. Now we're skipping over the most exciting console, just talking a little bit about the Nintendo GameCube. This thing was released in 2001. It's a literal cube and death machine. I mean, you spin this thing around, you're gonna kill somebody. Now, this was a fairly popular console. Introduced games like Animal Crossing, Luigi's Mansion, Pikmin, and the amazing Donkey Kong Bongo game. I mean, this thing was great. You get to play. You get 4 people with these fucking bongo controllers. Oh, it was a good time. It was a real good time. Now, the main controller for it, some out of a fever dream. I mean, look at this goddamn thing. It is like the fever dream of an abstract artist. It wasn't uncomfortable, that's for damn sure. It just looked confusing, but it came together fairly well once I got the hang of it. But I mean, it was so strange. It was just this rainbow of like colorful buttons. You knew the target audience. You just knew the target audience. Adults would give you strange looks if you were an adult and also owned a Nintendo GameCube. And you could sit there and be like, oh, I got it for Star Fox. Nobody's believing you, dude. Proving once again that Nintendo was trying to be trendsetter rather than just going with the flow. The controller breaks all rules of physics and it just does its own thing. It had the This Makes Sense joystick position of the Xbox controller on the opposite end of the X-axis. Meanwhile, it reintroduces the X and Y buttons with additional shoulder pads. The controller basically had what my friend coins as a GRS, or gamepad reconstruction surgery. The middle bit was just chopped off and they realized, hey, we don't need this middle bit anymore. We can just kind of stick it here, nice and cozy. So, got rid of the dick, kept the balls. What's the worst controller in the world? That still goes the Power Glove. It was just a weird controller. There's a reason nobody uses that design. And of course, yes, the Xbox. Now this thing was massive. There's so many jokes about it. You just look up Xbox jokes and you'll see why. The thing was a giant piece of hardware. And not only that, but the controller was also massive as hell. It basically was like hanging onto a boat wheel for dear life. They did eventually release a smaller version of the first one. I just love to know what the hell the developers were thinking with the first big ass one. For some reason, people like me with fairly large hands have still a lot to hold on to. It was uncomfortable at times, but it was like hard to argue that the build quality was really good. It didn't feel like it would be snapped in half. It felt like it could survive a few drops of the after dinner pizza grease 12-hour Halo marathon. Personally, I hate the Xbox controller in terms of stick positions and the D-pad. The D-pad felt like a spongy, like, hey, we're both a G-pad and a joystick, but it's more joystick than D-pad, quite frankly. The fact that it's standard for Microsoft games, the fact that I have to mod all my games to recognize a PS5 controller, including the inputs, irritates the shit out of me. But whatever. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the infamous Steel Battalion controller. Quite frankly, the greatest controller of all time. Had 34 plus buttons, each button with a job of its own. A gear shift, 5 toggle switches, 2 joysticks, 3 pedals, a dial right in the middle of it. It was a beast of a controller, and it only came with that game, costing a measly $200, because why would you pay anything less than what's basically the Power Glove of the Xbox? No, sorry, that's the Kinect. This thing is glorious, a horseman of the apocalypse. Women avert their eyes, fish fear it, men fear it, all who walk among it dare not gaze upon its magnificence. Not dark, but beautiful and terrible as the dawn, treacherous as the steel, stronger than the foundation of the earth. All shall love thee in despair. Oh, holy shit, where did I go? Anyways, the PS2. We gotta talk about it. It's the greatest console of all time. Factually, it is still the best-selling console of all time. I mean, look it up. Look it up. It's got what, 160 million units sold? Forget about it. Nothing is ever going to top. Matter of fact, I will be very curious to see what will top it. Because looking at Sony's track record and looking at the greatest consoles sold, it's basically the leaderboards that aren't handhelds. It's Sony. Unfortunately, my opinion is that Sony's kind of consoles are just kind of going down. So it's not going to be Sony that's going to come up with the next greatest PS2. And looking at Nintendo, unless they're going to pull a rabbit out the hat, and Xbox, they seem to be drifting more and more towards just building the same kind of console. It'll be interesting to see who comes up with a console that would beat the PS2 if it ever happens. But, you know, we're not talking about consoles here. We're talking about controllers, aren't we? This is the console. This is the controller. It sets standard for all controllers in the future. Sony basically wrote the book on how a controller should look. Setup was Nintendo's. You know, they set it up, the D-pad on the left, buttons on the right. Sony set the standard for 4 shoulders, 2 joysticks, D-pad, 4 buttons, with the start and select button. Every game console and even third-party controllers are still following this sort of setup. They may switch it around. You know, they may have a joystick up here, they may have a joystick up here, they may have them down here, they may be touchpads. But ultimately, they're the ones that set that standard. Except for Nintendo, who's still in their flower child phase. But I mean, even third-party controllers look like it. Other consoles basically copy it, they just rearrange it. They may even call the start and select button something different. PlayStation. You know, even if you type into Google game controller, it's either going to be the Xbox or it's going to be the PlayStation controller. That's the controller. Like, if you think, you're thinking now, what do you think of when you think of a game controller? You're thinking the Sony PlayStation controller. I mean, I could go on and on about the PS2. There's documentaries, there's videos, exposés, articles, records was set. The last game made for it was in 2013. It was a soccer game and I want to say a Naruto game. I couldn't find any proof of that online though, so that might have been a fever dream of mine. But it's still the best selling console of all time. Nintendo had to make 4 handhelds to catch up. And the only thing to sell better than PlayStation? Other PlayStations. Let's face it, you just not. Alright, just take a seat. Y'all done. Now, 7th gen comes along, things are starting to get a little more standard. Xbox controllers start to take shape to what we know how it looks like, and for some reason, PS3 decides it wants to play with the motion controllers. Gee, I wonder why. Still, the same shape as the DualShock controller, although we did lose out on the awesome Boomerang controller. And I mean, the only proof of it ever existing was a tech demo, and that controller, I mean, it looked teeny tiny. About the size of my hand, I want to say. So we did luck out. If it was going to be that small, we did luck out, because that would have been the worst controller ever. Personally, I still miss the Boomerang controller, and I really would have loved it if the PS3 had that. But again, with PS2 controllers, you know, they felt pretty good. They felt pretty solid. Good build control. Good build quality. Unless, of course, you start getting stick drift, which either you tear it apart, clean it, or you just chuck it in a bin. Now, the Wii controller, or controllers, or nunchucks, whatever the hell it was. This was Nintendo's try at motion controls, which, let's face it, it was really split down the middle. They were both hailed as like the greatest thing ever, and silliest thing ever. You're all pretty familiar with the idea of waggling controller, because that's basically what it was. Described by Yahtzee as, you come home from a long day, only to wave your hands around playing a video game. Nobody wants to do that. Yeah, listen, if you're waving your hands around playing a game, you weren't playing. You could literally sit like this, and boom, there's your game. But quite frankly, they were both. They were innovative, they were fun, they were the best source of memes ever. The Wii sold about 101 million consoles. People wanted this thing. And I myself have a loving, wonderful parents waiting in line to get the Wii. And by the way, Mom, I love you. I still even have my Wii and I still play it. I don't have too many games for it, but the ones that I do, I still have fun with. Not only that, but it's a very versatile controller. You plug in the nunchuck, and now you've got the standard use of it. You got your little joystick thing, which will move your character around. You got a Mario game, you flip the main controller. Now you've got an old NES controller. You got all sorts of like light gun attachments to it. You can put it in the weird the main controller here, you put the little nunchuck at the back, and you got yourself a fairly versatile little blaster thingy. Unfortunately, they folded, and then they just released a controller. Now, I wonder if we're going to consider the connected controller. Nah. If you go down the lines, controllers really don't have anything more interesting to offer. For the most part, no innovations happened. The Wii U tried with a giant tablet-like controller, costs about $180 per freaking tablet controller, but the Wii U was their worst-selling home console. Conveniently ignoring the Virtual Boy, but whatever. The controller acted as a second screen, giving you interactive menu options, a map, things like that. Meanwhile, PlayStation was still doing gimmicky stuff with a controller, a touchpad, and a share button for their social media for some reason. Everybody was being obsessed with social media, I don't know why. And then if you go to Nintendo Switch, you got the detachable Joy-Cons, but it still has, a controller. Now, controllers mean they're a fascinating subject, but none so fascinating as the third-party market. The Wii controllers, you thought the Wii controllers were gimmicky? Promotional controllers are crazier. There's a Resident Evil 4 chainsaw controller. There's an Onimusha 3 samurai sword controller. The Samurai Mask controller for the Call of Duty Zombies. Not to mention the piles and piles and piles of light guns. Some ranging guns with working slides for every time you fire, to hunks of plastic, to worryingly historically accurate, and even ones you could potentially rob a store with. My personal favorite, of course, are Time Crisis and the Nintendo Super Scope. Fucking rocket launcher that I'm pretty sure the Taliban were trying to use. The Resident Evil 4 one for the Wii, which is just a giant ass revolver and a knife attachment. The only problem was the revolver was basically a piece of shit and broke within 2 weeks. Fun while it lasted. And of course, let's not forget the infamous Wu-Tang controller. I'd love to hear what they were thinking with that. And of course, you've got the Guitar Hero controllers, the Turbo Touch SNES controller, which was this like sliding D-pad thing, the DJ Hero controllers, the list goes on. These controllers were nuts. They were fun though. Let's face it. But of course, the most infamous when it comes to third-party controllers goes to Mad Catz, famous for being, here's your controller, bro, and every single one of them having a turbo button, because apparently I need to jump 9 million times in the span of a second. Of course, I had 5 of them. So Mad Catz controllers were cool, and of course, who could forget this series of colorful see-through plastics? Mad Catz even had their own boomerang controller for about $10 on Amazon, so you could still get your boomerang controller, which I don't understand why I didn't get that. I don't know. Mad Catz even has a flight stick and joystick controllers for the N64. I don't know anybody who used those. I've never seen one before. I've only seen it in magazines. I'm pretty sure it was released later on in life. Really, the main reason they were so popular was because they were a bit cheaper, a lot of stylish. The see-through plastics were a great gimmick, and of course, they had more features. Apparently, a turbo button is a feature. Some had more rubber on the hand grips, some had fans on the hand grips, one even had a steering wheel in place of a joystick. I can't find it though. Anyone who owned a game console between PlayStation 2 and up knows the horrors of third-party controllers and how they never worked. Now, the Steam controller looks cool. Not a big fan of the 2 touchpad controllers, but I've never used one. I've heard they're pretty good. I've heard they're pretty responsive. The Thrustmaster ESWAP Pro had the ability to change out sections of a controller to design it however you like, although I don't remember if they were the first ones to introduce this here or not. The fact is, it's just pretty cool. Let me know in the comments if you remember who did it first, or if they were the first. Other controllers can add like casing ends for buttons, colors, styles, paint schemes, all that. Custom PlayStation Xbox controllers are a pretty big market now. Cell phones also have their own controllers. They have trackball controllers will never not be funny. There's even a hot dog controller that I absolutely have to buy. Like right now, excuse me. Gaming accessories are absolutely a fascinating thing. It's more fascinating to see how they evolved over the years. I'll definitely do a part 2 exploring aftermarket controllers, third market, and the fun and goofy extras that came with the controllers. But hey, I'd like to thank you for tuning into the Red Guy Show. I am Maxim Davis, the host of the Red Guy Show, and I'll see you next time.